Hello, welcome to Seeking the Kingdom of God channel. So, here we are with another edition of Radical Giving. Today, the teaching will focus on the goodness of God, and despite our weaknesses, our inadequacies, um, our faults, despite that, the goodness of God. That's what we're going to look at. And when He expresses His goodness, it's like He strikes fear into your heart. Now you wonder, why would goodness strike fear? So to give you an example of how it looks like in real life. So how many of you as young men or young women respect your parents so much that you don't ever want them to hear about all your faults and mistakes that you've made? You feel that if they discover it, then their heart would really break, and your identity in their eyes would be much lesser than it was before. How many of you felt that? I know of people who don't smoke in front of their parents. They don't watch, movies which they believe are not going to be appreciated by their parents in front of their parents. All of this is for what? You're respecting the fact that your parents are somebody special who have always thought good about you, who've always given good things for you, and because they have been so good to you, you don't want to hurt them by showing them that there are some parts of you which are not according to what their perception of you is. With God, you can't hide anything, right? You might think that uh, uh, that with God, is it similar? It is not similar, because God knows everything about you, and despite that, your parents may not have known everything about you, and they're continuing to be good to you. You might think, in fact, your idea might be, if they discovered how that I have clay feet, that I'm not the person that um, that they imagine me to be, then they may not be as loving to me or as kind to me. That's possibly one of the reasons why you're very particular about something that you don't do in front of your parents. But with God, it's like He knows what you're doing. He knows your ins and outs, what you're thinking even. He knows your thoughts even before you think them. And then too, he can't he can't stop being good to you. And then you can imagine the awe it should strike in your heart, that a God who knows everything about me and yet doesn't stop loving me, what is the nature of that God? And the fact that, to be close to that nature, I would fall so short of it. I would so fall short of it that I can't even imagine it. And that's what is called the fear of the Lord. That I can't even imagine being close to the standard that He is in. And you feel a sense of humility, and that's what is called the fear of the Lord. Well, something like that happened. And that's what we're going to talk about in the life of Joseph. But it didn't happen to Joseph, because Joseph was so very close to God that there was no point in time that he was even going to imagine doing something that would make God, uh, you know, uh, that would hurt, or that would be against the standard of God. He never even imagined that. You know it from our previous readings from Joseph's life, about the fact that when he was tempted by Potiphar's wife, he didn't even interact with her. He didn't talk to her. He just stayed away from her. And when some things came to a head, he just left that place. He didn't want to be anywhere close to that temptation or close to that woman. So you can imagine that with Joseph, there was no such problem. But they were his brothers. His brothers were the kind of people that we are, we had something to hide. The kind of people who have something to hide from God, who have something to hide from their parents, who love them a lot, and we still have something to hide from them, because we are not up to the standards that we believe that we should be in. Well, despite that, God didn't stop being good to them. So let's take a look at that. So what happened? In fact, the rest of Joseph's life, you can read about it from the chapter 42 all the way up till chapter 50. But we are going to focus on the chapter 42 so that we can get to the point of God's goodness to people who um, don't fulfill his standards of how a human being should be. So let's read from verse 1. So the context is that till now, all of the world is experiencing famine, but there is a lot of grain in Egypt. So other nations are coming to Egypt to buy grain from them. So the case would have been similar with Joseph's family too, back in his homeland of Canaan. They would also be experiencing famine, and they would have also heard that there's grain in Egypt, and so they probably also had plans to come to Egypt to buy some grain. So that's what happened. So chapter 42, verse 1. When Jacob saw, Jacob is Joseph's father, if you don't remember. When Jacob saw that there was grain in Egypt, Jacob said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another? Why do you look so desperate that you don't have enough to eat? Indeed, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down to that place and buy for us there, that we may live and not die." So don't be so sad about the fact that you don't have anything to eat. You can go to the land of Egypt and get some food from there, and we will all live then. So Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt. But Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers. So we have not talked about the 12th brother that Joseph had. Joseph was the 11th. Joseph had another brother after him called Benjamin, and Benjamin and Joseph were from the same mother. The other brothers that Joseph had were from different mothers, but they were all Jacob's sons. Joseph's brother Benjamin was not sent by Jacob, for he said, "Lest some calamity befall him." And he didn't want that to happen. And the sons of Israel, Jacob, went to buy grain among those who journeyed, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. So along with the other nations, they also went to Egypt. Now Joseph was the governor over the land, and it was he who sold to all the people of the land. So it was like Joseph was personally in charge of selling the grain to different groups of people who came to buy grain from Egypt. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed down before him with their faces to the earth. Does that ring a bell? Remember Joseph's dream that one day would come when Joseph's brothers would all bow down to the earth. Yeah. And in that dream, there were sheaves. The sheaves were the brothers, and the one sheaf that was standing up was Joseph. Do you remember that? Well, it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Because Joseph was in a place where grain was plenty, and his brothers were in a place where they had no grain whatsoever. So they were in a state of famine, whereas their sheaves were barren, whereas Joseph's sheaf was full of grain. So Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he acted as a stranger to them and spoke roughly to them. And then he said to them, "Where do you come from?" So he decided not to be very kind. So he had a plan up his sleeve. So that's the reason he was behaving like that. And they said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food. We have come here from Canaan." So Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Then Joseph remembered the dreams which he had dreamt about them and said to them, "You are spies." So he remembered his own dreams, just like we remembered the dreams that he had. He also had a flashback of all the dreams that he had had, where his brothers were concerned and his family was concerned. So he immediately said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land. You have come to see how denuded the land is, and you're actually spies. You're not here to buy grain." And they dissuaded him. They said to him, "No, we have come here because we want to buy grain, we want to buy food." And they start to present their credentials to assure him that they are genuine. So what are their credentials? So we are all one man's sons. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies. But he said to them, no, but you have come to it. So Joseph kept insisting that they were lying. And they said finally that your servants are actually 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. So they give a little more detail. And in fact, the youngest is with our father today, and one is no more. So in a way, they were explaining to him their background, and they were telling him that one of their brothers was no more, but the 12th one was with their father. So in a way, they were also telling the truth. In the sense, as far as they knew, they had no clue where Joseph was. So they probably thought he was really no more. Otherwise, he would have ended up going back to the land of Canaan and confronting them with what they had done to him. But Joseph was not, first, he was not free, he was a slave. And then when he did have the freedom, he didn't remember one of his sons was named that the birth of the son has made me forget my toil and my father's family. So apparently he had decided to forget about the whole thing, forget about all those things that led him to the point where he was in jail and he was a slave and all of that. Because what was showered on by God, the position that Pharaoh gave him, the riches that he got, all of them, his wife and his children, all of that just removed the memory of all the sorrows that he had experienced till then. So he had decided to forget it all. So it was, that is the reason he never went back to confront his brothers with what they had done to him. But Joseph said to them, it is as I spoke to you, saying, you are spies. So he still kept insisting. So what he did was, because he didn't believe them, he said, I'm going to, I can't believe you. So what you need to do is, unless you send somebody, one of your brothers, to go back and fetch your youngest brother. And then only will I know that you're telling the truth. And that is when I will sell you food. So until the time that, I still don't trust you, so I'm going to put you all in jail. So for 3 days, he put them all together in prison. Now, at the end of 3 days, he relented a little and told them, why don't you do this and you will live? I'll let you live because I fear God. So he told them, if you're honest men, let one of your brothers be confined to your prison house, but you go and carry grain for the famine of your houses and bring your youngest brother to me, so your words will be verified and you shall not die. So now he changed his plan. So instead of keeping all of them and sending one brother, he decided to send all of them and keep one brother in prison. So they did it. And so what they did was, they agreed. But then what happened was, while he was passing his sentence on them, they spoke to one another. We are truly guilty concerning our brother. So apparently these brothers had never been able to forget the fact that they had sold their brother, that they had pushed him in a cistern or pushed him in a ditch, a deep ditch, and then they had sold him to some traders, and they had lied to their father about him. They just never were able to get over that guilt. So they speak to each other about it. And what do they say? So he says, they say to each other, we saw the anguish of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not hear. Therefore, this distress has come upon us. So they felt that this kind of punishment, or this state of their lives when they are in prison, and they would only be able to go back to their, they would only be able to prove their credentials if they were able to bring their youngest brother back, and that they had to leave one brother in prison. All of this has come upon them because they were so cruel to their brother, despite the fact that he was pleading with them not to do this to him. Despite that, they did it, and they were heartless, and now they had to bear the punishment, bear the consequence of doing something like that. And Reuben answered them, saying, did I not speak to you? Did I not tell you, do not sin against the boy, and you would not listen? Therefore, behold, his blood is now required of us. So they continue in the same way. But they did not know that Joseph understood them. he understood what they were saying, for he spoke to them through an interpreter. That he'd never let on to them that he was their brother. Uh, so he understood them while they were discussing the whole issue with each other. And he turned himself away from them and wept. Then he returned to them again and talked with them. And he took Simeon, Simeon is the name of one of the brothers, from them and bound him before their very eyes. So he imprisoned Simeon and let the others go. How did he let the others go? He said, he did this. Verse 25. Then Joseph gave a command to fill their sacks with grain. He told his servants to make sure that their grain sacks were full of grain, and also to restore every man's money to his sack. So Joseph, it looks like Joseph was not actually being cruel. His kindness got the better of him. And it was as though he was putting on an act for some reason. I have a feeling he was putting on an act so that he wanted to make sure that they had not done the same thing to his younger brother as they had done to him. So he wanted proof of the fact that his younger brother was still alive. So that's the reason he was going to this extent. And even then, even that couldn't stop him from being good to them. How was he good to them? He didn't take any money from them. So he restored all their money into their sacks and gave them provisions for the journey. It's not as though he said, okay, you've got the grain in your sack and you deal with your own food during the journey. No, he provided them for the journey as well. This he did for them. So they loaded their donkeys with the grain and departed from there. But as one of them opened his sack to give his donkey a feed at a roadside encampment, at a roadside campsite, he opened his sack and he saw his money. And there it was in the mouth of his sack. So he said to his brothers, my money has been restored, and there it is in my sack. Then their hearts failed them, and they were afraid, saying to one another, what is this that God has done to us? So they thought that it was one of their brothers only who got the money back in his sack. And do you know what I suspect? I suspect it must have been the brother who was the cruelest to Joseph. I have a feeling that must have been the case. Why? Because I believe God is like that. God goes after lost sheep. He is after that one sheep who refuses to turn. He wants that sheep to turn. And so he goes after it. And so he made sure that this was the first brother who discovered, that's the reason I believe, this was the first brother who discovered that his money was in his sack. His money was not taken from him. Instead, it was given back to him. Then when they went back home, they told everything to Jacob, all that had happened. Their father was really upset because he had lost Joseph. Now another one of his sons was gone, and now his sons were telling him that if they ever went back to Egypt for more grain, they would have to make sure that to take Benjamin with them, the youngest brother with them, and if they didn't do that, they would never be able to get grain again from Egypt. So they would have to do that. And Jacob is very, very sad. At that time it happened, they all emptied their sacks because they had gone home. They all emptied their sacks, and each one of them, surprisingly, each man's bundle of money was in his sack. And when they and their father saw the bundles of money, they were all afraid. And Jacob, their father, said to them, you've bereaved me, you've distressed me. Joseph is no more. Simeon is as good as no more, because you can't go back. I'm not sending Benjamin back. So I can't get Simeon back. Simeon is going to rot in prison. And all these things are against me. And now here, despite all these problems, we have all this money back with us. So it is like as though we are still in debt to Joseph, to the governor of Egypt. And we are still in debt to the governor of Egypt because he hasn't taken any money from us. So what they thought was against them was actually God's blessing on them. And I would think if your money has been returned back to you, then it would be that it was a way of telling you that you are forgiven. When are you going to turn back to me? That is the message that God was giving to them, although they probably did not know it. They discovered it much later. But just the fact that the whole thing snowballs from one thing into another, they go back, and then there is a lot more drama happening with Joseph. And when they go back again with Benjamin, Joseph sees him, is happy, and he sends the brothers, all the brothers, back with more grain. And when he sends them back with more grain, that time he he returns their he returns the money that they brought again, and he returns the original money again, because these people, they felt indebted to him, so they take the money back and hand it over, and Joseph doesn't accept it. Even that is sent back to them, so they're all the more afraid about this generosity of this governor, that he would give them grain free of cost. He would give them grain, and he didn't even have them lose their money. So that is what is the lesson that we need to take today with us from the point of view of radical giving. Because when God gives, he doesn't want anything from you. In fact, you can't give him anything. You can't purchase from him his goodness. How can you purchase God's goodness from him? You can't. You can only say, thank you. Thank you for being so good to me. Despite my many mistakes, you're good to me. I thank you for that. I praise you for that. And I'm sorry that till now that I have ignored this goodness. And I don't want to do that anymore. I want to be able to be an object of your goodness and love while I'm in resonating with your heart. That is what would be a real response. And that is what is the response that God is seeking for. God is not seeking for any of your possessions. He is not seeking for any, he's not seeking to withhold from you any blessings that he has. All he wants is for you to hand him yourself. Give yourself to him, so that he will be able to be one with you, and he will be able to make you move towards fulfilling the destiny for which he has created you. That is what his desire is. His desire is for you to stop doing those things that are against the nature that he wants you to have. All he wants you to give to him at the end is what is not yours, actually. The sin that is not yours, that was pushed on you by the enemy, that was enslaving you to keep you away from your creator, from your God, from the person who is the source of your life, and from the person who has saved you, from Jesus. That sin is keeping you away from all this goodness. And that's what he wants you to give up. He doesn't want anything else from you. Just wants you to give up his sin. And then he is for sure going to fulfill all those things that his word promises. Doesn't he say in the book of Matthew that look at the birds of the air, they neither sow nor reap, and yet your father takes care of them every day. None of them go hungry. The lilies of the field, they neither toil nor spin, and yet they are clothed much better than King Solomon, who was the richest king of the land, of the world. So it's like he's telling you that there's nothing you can do to make him love you more. He already loves you with all his life. He gave his body and his blood for you. That's how much he loves you. So he's already given you radically everything that you need. Now that should basically tell you, oh my God, I need you. I can't do this on my own. So just take me as I am and give me the grace to be the way you are. That's what is our response. That's the only response we can have. Any other response is like an insult to a God who doesn't stop loving you, despite your many mistakes, despite the mistakes of trying to kill their brother, sell him off, and lie to their father about it, allow their father to be bereaved all these years with the misconception that their brother and his son, his beloved son, was dead. What more does God want from them? That they change. That's all he wants. That they change. That change the way they think, change the way they live. When they change the way they think, they will change the way they live. And what is the change of thinking? The change of thinking is God is good. He is good towards you, and He wants you to believe in Him that He is good. And when you believe in Him that He is good, you will receive everything else that you need to fulfill the destiny for which you have been called. And how do you fulfill that destiny? Just make sure that you are in responding to His goodness every day. Every day we see in our lives God's goodness in one way or another, whether we believe in Him or not. Do you think it's pure chance that everybody in this world is alive? It's not. There are people who you would consider as thorough sinners. Aren't they alive? Aren't they prospering? Aren't they prospering beyond their understanding? So how does it happen if it wasn't for God's goodness? What is it that makes God good to them? It's because of Jesus Christ. All our sins, even theirs, have been forgiven by God, has been washed clean by Him. And so He can be good to them. For what purpose? So that they turn. So that they will stop thinking like as though they have to grab for life, that they have to make do by themselves. He wants them to change that thinking, and He wants us all to believe that we cannot get life, the life that He plans for us, an abundant life. We can't have that life by grabbing. All we'll get is a very um, shabby picture of the real abundant life that we can have. We'll only be compromising. The only we can get the abundant life that He has in store for us is by accepting that He has given up His life for us. And when we do that, we can give up the sin which doesn't belong to us anyway, and accept His righteousness and live with His mindset in us every day. And that is radical giving, isn't it? It is the most radical giving that you can ever come across. Why is this so important, this message so important? This is the very reason. You cannot have what is meant for you, what is yours, until you change your thinking about God and look at Jesus and say, I need Him. You cannot have it. You can only have a shabby representation of it, which is not the truth, which is all a sham, which is all going to be here today and gone tomorrow. And you won't even know what hit you. Okay, so considering that God gives us so much, why don't we give to His cause? So if you feel like giving, because this channel is all about propagating His cause, if you feel like giving to this channel while we propagate His cause of bringing people to know the love of God, to know the love of Christ, please feel free to either PayTM your gift or PhonePe your gift to 93554-71129. And if you do give to this channel, please write to me to stkogchannel2020@gmail.com so that I can send you a free ebook as my appreciation for your giving. Thank you very much. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow with another edition of God's Radical Giving. Take care. Bye-bye.